Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
So tonight we're here to interview the first of two candidates for superintendent. This evening it will be there'll be three parts to the evening. First, we'll ask you to make an opening statement. Then we have prepared questions that each member will ask you. And then after each question, there could be follow-up questions. And then we'll ask you to make a closing statement. I guess at this point, I would just give each school committee member an opportunity to introduce themselves. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Mary Morgan.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Hi, Andrea. I'm Kevin Berjali.
Hi, Kevin. It's nice to see you.
Go ahead.
You're next.
Oh, Joyce Bakayaki.
Hi, Joyce.
April Rossi.
Hi, April.
Jeff Sweat.
Hi, Jeff.
Okay, so we've
to reconvene public session.
Oh, probably, yes. So at this time, we will reconvene our meeting into open session. So we've had an opportunity to read your application, your resume, and the materials that you've provided to us. We've had site visits. So at this time, we'd just like you to take a few minutes and tell us a little bit more about yourself. Give us an opening statement.
Okay, sure. So first, I want to thank you for inviting me to this, to speak to you about this opportunity. I've had the privilege of serving the Wareham Public Schools for the last 8 years, and it has been an incredible adventure. I have learned a tremendous amount. I've been in a really good position to look at the details, to understand what has happened, and analyze that and assess that deeply, to be put in a position now where I think I can add to the continued momentum and growth of the Wareham Public Schools. Because it's a small district, as many of you know, we're given opportunities to do many things. It's never just the job that you take that you actually do. You end up doing whatever is necessary at any point to help the overall organization. And so that's filled me with an incredible wealth of knowledge and information. I've spent a significant amount of time building relationships with various stakeholders, from teachers to department chairs to assistant principals. I know people very well. I spend a lot of time speaking with them just generally, and have done all that I can in my current position to support them. I understand that there's been tumultuous times in Wareham Public Schools, and I'm hopeful that we can learn from those experiences to move on from what's happened and where it's going. And I feel that because I understand the nuances of all of those events, the good and the other things that were challenging, it will help me to better address those in the future. As they say, when you name it, you tame it. So knowing, I think, is putting me in a very good position to help us to continue to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jeff.
How come I'm always first? So my first question is, ask you to describe the three most important initiatives in order of increasing importance you have taken in your current position, and the measurable impact they have had on the education of students in the school district.
Well, when I first arrived, it was looking at the organization as a whole and to determine where we might be able to improve how things were done, because there were some problems with teacher evaluation specifically. And so it was really important to look at who was evaluating and how we were evaluating and how we could actually improve the teaching practices in the district. There were people when I got here that were very upset I think overall with the way that the evaluation process was being done, I don't know if that was generally speaking, but I had a evaluation subcommittee, which I'm contractually obligated to have every year, of probably 30 people at that meeting. And they were very, very active in supporting a change in the process. The other issue is that we needed to improve teaching and learning, and in order to do that, we needed to coach. We needed to have people around to be able to identify how they could help teachers to then rise to the level of teaching that the schools needed in a way that was effective. And so with a lot of work and collaboration with the evaluation subcommittee of that time, we were able to first start out with the assumption that everyone wants to be exemplary right out of the gate, rather than starting with an assumption that we're going to catch somebody doing something wrong. And so that helped people to then start to identify where they can actually have effect on the teachers that were teaching. And so with that process, we created a document that was collaboratively, that was very simple to understand the evaluation system and read it. It's a 2-page document that explained it. And then we corrected all the forms on the software system that we use because it was confusing initially. People didn't know which form they were supposed to fill out for what purpose, so we cleaned that up as a group. And then we were able to restructure, with the help of the school committee, the teams and how they operated. So we took what was used to be an instructional leader. There were a couple of positions, a teacher leader, instructional leader, and they were in the contract and they were being paid, and we just switched them over to department chairs and assistant principals so that they could actually get in and evaluate. And that gave us a way in which we had a manageable amount of people to evaluate. It was not as manageable prior. So if you have 10 or 12 people that you're paying attention to throughout the school year, you actually get to develop relationships and see what's going on. So that, I think, was a huge impact. And because I'm contractually obligated to have that committee every year, now I beg people to join. It's not a very popular one, so I have a handful of people that will acquiesce and come to the meeting. But it's worked brilliantly well for a number of reasons. And the relationships, I think, are very positive. And I think they would tell me if they felt like something needed to change. But we really don't have a whole lot to talk about in that system. So that was very, very important, because it really is about teaching and learning. So that was a huge initiative that I think was very important. And it's still in practice, and so it must be working, I suppose, right? Usually a change like that, if it continues, is something we should continue to do. So that was a huge initiative. And then we didn't have any curriculum, really, to speak of that was written. And there was no template, no common template designed for people to actually put curriculum in. And there was, I believe, an overdependence on programs. So there was this idea that if you just follow the program, everything would be okay. If you just follow what the book says, everything will be okay. And we don't teach books, we teach students. And every student comes in unique, with their own unique needs. And it's the magic of the teacher that can identify what students need, and therefore provide the right dose of curriculum at the right time in the right place for those students. And so that was very important, to design a template. So I put one together, and then I shared it out with the department chairs and all the schools. They gave feedback. I implemented that feedback. We had it go out again, and I think by the third round, everybody agreed that this was the template. And since then, there are probably 150 units of rich curriculum that's been developed from our teachers, from the people who know our kids, using the resources, of course, as a way to reach kids. So that was an important initiative. Reading was a problem, and I was very concerned because this is a historic problem. It was a problem in my last district too, so it wasn't a new problem. But it was we didn't have a way to assess properly. They used to do these tests that were done on Scantron, but there was only one Scantron machine, and that was at central office. So all of those 1,000 whatever cards would show up at central office, and somebody had to feed them into a machine, right, to get the data. And if the data comes too late, then what do you can't really make decisions based on the information that you gather. So we put in a system that was immediate. So students participated in that system. We got immediate response reaction. We knew then what to do from that point once you get that information. But what was frightening was the amount of kids that were below the norm at the end of kindergarten, the first year we assessed. It was startling because at the same time I was also listening to conversations about the interventionists we used to have, right? And when you're intervening with 15 or 20% of your students, that's probably more manageable than 60%. But when you have 60% of your kids, they grew, but they were below the national norm. So the teachers were clearly working. It's not like the kids weren't, learning. It's just that they weren't learning at the level that was competitive with other districts. And there were too many. So that was frightening. It felt like an emergency, so to speak. It's not something you can just sit on. But the problem is we have the reading wars, right? Historically speaking, through all kinds of research, there's these wars between whole language and phonemic awareness, and there's all these ideas and all these programs that have come and gone. And I was an English teacher, so I saw it with my own eyes, what was happening. We couldn't really find an answer. And so just by happenstance, I got in touch with someone when I was in China looking at schools through the College Board, not through Wareham Public Schools. I applied through the College Board, went over, and I met a superintendent from Maine who was there. And he was telling me about this person who'd done a lot of research, was a special ed director, and had a child, twins, one that was significantly delayed and had some real issues. And she had started to do a lot of research on the brain and what was happening. And through that research, we realized a number of things, and we're still learning, because we were actually ahead of the current research that's coming out now, which is also very interesting. But we realized that in order for a student to read and have fluency become part of them, so that they own it and they no longer lose skills when they leave school, but they're just part of who they are, you have to build the corpus callosum, which is the circuit between the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. And you do that through certain movements and so on and so forth. And it was a little bit scary to start that project because it was a little different than what we had ever done. But we started with a few kindergarten classes and started to measure. And we noticed that things were changing. And that process has changed as our teachers become smarter and have added to the whole process, making it really quite interesting to watch what's happened, how we're looking at data, how we're informing instructions, the different materials that are chosen are thoughtful. Something's changed, and our kids are in much better shape than they had been before. And to me, that was huge because it changes everything from now on in the district. But it's patience, and you have to wait. So that was a very important initiative. You said 3. I could go on, but you said 3.
And were they in increasing importance that you gave? Evaluations, curriculum, and literacy?
I can't really accurately answer that question, to be honest with you.
They seem to be, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I don't know that I could value them because it's sort of a circle. It isn't a linear line.
And is it fair to say the third one could be measured, the literacy?
So can the evaluation.
How would you measure that?
We have an evaluation system that helps us to measure progress through time. And we know that through documentation, written documentation, walkthroughs, and the amount of times that we are in looking and watching, that's all data.
Thank you. I'm
Sure.
all set.
Kevin?
Hi. With a significant number of families opting out of Wareham via school choice, how will you help ensure parents and the public that Wareham schools provide a quality education and well-rounded extracurricular experience? How can we effectively brand our schools and tell our story?
I'll start with the branding because I think we've begun that process with the strategic plan because that was part of the whole idea with the strategic plan was finding a way to brand our brand our product. But another thing that's really important is having a consistent product that works. And so that's proven over time, and that was really important. So if we had done this and had not as much success a few years back, or we didn't have enough consistency and so on and so forth, right? Our product was a little bit like shaky in a way, and so building the product is extremely important so that when you do advertise it or say what it is you're doing, you need to be sure that it's true. And I think we're at a good point where we can do that. I believe that some are not telling the truth about what we offer at Wareham Public Schools, because there are some unbelievable people working for the Wareham Public Schools, not only in the classroom but also extracurricular. Our programs are second to none. There's not another district that offers the summer programs and the care programs and the work that Jane Fondulis has done over time to build up those opportunities for kids is amazing. They don't offer these in other districts. There's nothing in other districts for the summer. We have a whole summer program. So the question is, how do we communicate that effectively to families? Partly, I believe that there has to be some personal connection to families, that we can't think that they're just going to show up when we ask them to come to an event. We've seen that sometimes that doesn't work so well. And so I think having personal reaching out to people and asking them to meet more individually, and I get it, it's a lot of work, I've done it before. I think you can start to forge relationships with people that then begin to change their feeling about what's going on in school. What is said, some of the things that are, well, I don't really know what's said because I don't pay a whole lot of attention to negativity. It takes me off my game, and it's really important that I stay in this place of hope for our kids and the people that serve our students. But I've visited a lot of districts this year, and we are by far in a fantastic place, ahead of the curve in many areas, even with wealthy districts that I visited, that it's hard for me to believe that anyone would have anything negative to say about our district. And maybe I'm biased, but I see what I see. And so I think getting that message out and making connections with people, being transparent, available, open, would help build trust with families, and hopefully the superintendent in the position will do that, will be open to finding ways to reach people.
Thank you.
A major role of the school committee is to conduct evaluations of our superintendent. If given a less than proficient score in a potential evaluation, what would your course of action be? Would you consider the constructive criticism and address what may have been seen as shortcomings, acknowledge and make strides to correct them, or would you consider the evaluation derogatory and seek legal action?
Personally, I've had many people weigh in on what they think about what I do and what I don't do, and so on and so forth. I do know that what I bring to the table is my full commitment, hard work, and dedication to this profession, and it comes from somewhere else. Like, it's just an energy that really exists on its own. I also understand that none of this is about me. And I think that that's a perspective that many people don't think about. I'm the person here to help and serve the people that are important here, which are the students and the people that serve the students. So I suppose if the school committee had something to say, first, I would hope that we would have addressed it sooner than an evaluation. Because if it's a problem that's lasting, I would hope that the relationship between the school committee and the superintendent was one that people felt comfortable saying, hey, listen, I have an issue here, or I'd like to ask you questions about this or that, and we could actually dialogue about it. I've had many disagreements with people, and it's helped us both through time, because I think everyone learns from that dialogue. So I think that the process for the superintendent is flawed in how it's done, to be honest. I mean, it really should be a personal conversation, because I run the evaluation system, or I lead the evaluation system in the district. What I always say to people is, don't leave people surprised, right? Like at the end game. Don't call them into the office and say something like, you know what, you didn't work out, you're out. That's just not the right thing to do. If something's amiss, then you need to have the conversation with people so that they can do something about it, or that they can at least, rise to the occasion. So, and it's worked out really well for many of the people that evaluate, because they're able to have these conversations with people as they go, right? So I don't love surprises. I would hate to think that I'd been going all along thinking in my head that I was doing a great job, but that somewhere along the line somebody was upset and I didn't know about it. Like, that would be devastating to me. So I would hope that we were in a position where that wasn't the equation, right? That we could have a conversation and you could say what you were upset about, and then we could make a plan, or I could make a plan on trying to improve. I am certainly far from perfect, and know that I will make mistakes along the way, and apologize and own them. I've done it here, and I'll continue to do that in my life. I think it's the job of the superintendent to make sure that they're the line of fire. You're it. The buck stops with you. And your job is to protect the people that work in your district. And we need to protect one another. Because negativity, public negativity, doesn't necessarily serve our students in their best interest. So I would hope that there would be a way in which we could work it through as a team.
Thank you.
So there's been a lot of discussion about the effects that the pandemic has had on our students and the learning loss that has occurred. And we don't hear as much about the profound effect that it's had on our teachers and our staff who are working with these students every day. So what strategies would you use going forward to support these teachers and other staff members?
You're right about that. Mm-hmm. And it's actually been stated by teachers that they thought there'd be more learning loss, but what they're finding more issues with social emotional rather than that. So they're struggling, I think, too, with that, which is more struggle for them, right? Mm-hmm. So we're really looking deeply at social emotional issues overall, and more explicitly than not. And so Massachusetts doesn't have standards for social emotional learning. They've integrated them into each of the subject areas. And that's just not going to do it for us right now. I think we need to look at those elements really carefully and start to address that. And so, and I thought that a while back. So what we did was we created a social emotional learning committee. So through Title IV, I was able to provide some funding for teachers to work on these committees. And so I posted the position, and I had a lot of interest from teachers in this committee, and they're at all schools. So every school has a group of people that are digging in to figure out what is it we need to do for ourselves and for our kids to feel better, right, to be healthier. And they've done some tremendous work. For example, I believe they had a meeting today, and Mrs. Chandler has developed a website that has lists of different applications that teachers can use immediately to help them. So her plan, I believe, is to do one for staff, one for students, and one for families as it develops, so that we have kind of access to the immediate need. Along with that, this weekend just so happened that I went through and I found standards out of California. They actually have explicit standards that were supported by another group we use, which is CASEL. And the Social Emotional Learning Committee is using CASEL to sort of formulate a plan. And so California has these standards, and so I took the standards, all of them, from pre-K all the way through adult, and I put them on a shared Google Sheet. And I numbered them the same way that Massachusetts numbers their academic standards, just so that we'd have a pattern to follow. And basically, it addresses all of the areas that we need to look at or reflect upon and think about as we move forward. It's obviously an extremely important endeavor. I sent that document to the state actually yesterday because I thought it might be helpful to them. And they said, oh yeah, we stalled on that. We never got that done, but we integrated them into our subject areas. And I thought after, because all I said was, hey, if this could be helpful to you, great. If not, that's okay too. It didn't make any difference to me because we're going to move ahead. But I think that just integrating them in, I mean, I don't think that's enough. I think we really need to take a look. And we need to know, how are we going to plan for that? What do we plan to teach around that? What do we need to offer people? And then our professional development is going to have a high focus around social emotional learning. And I've contacted a couple of vendors just out of curiosity to see what they offer. There's a couple that are out there that have specific social emotional platforms and surveys and things like that. So I'm going to talk to them. I don't know how much they cost, obviously, so I'm investigating it. But it's something we're taking very seriously and definitely want to allow for some help around that area overall.
So would it be true to say that we have had no professional development this year in that area?
We had Polly Bath here, who was here all last year. So she was available for all virtually. She was supposed to come in person, but because of the pandemic, she couldn't. So we switched all of her professional development to virtual. So we've had that. We've done some PBIS. We've done ruler training through the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. This year, what I want to do is look at all of what we have done, because we've had a high focus on that. It hasn't been neglected, but I needed the staff to sort of take part in analyzing where we are and where are we going from here. So that's been a huge focus in what we're doing right now. Because there were a lot of things, and we need a plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So just for clarification, and maybe I totally missed it, but I thought you were asking about teachers and staff members rather than students.
I was.
So how are we supporting teachers and staff members?
Well, there's a lot going on. So part of it's been a bit complicated, to be honest, because particularly here, they were at DECUS, and there was then there was the moving, and so really, I've left them alone, sort of let them be, not been, I've been in a lot, I've had a lot of conversations with teachers, but not a whole lot of pressure on them, right? Just sort of breathe and take care of your kids. And I think all the principals have done that with their staff overall, offered them just a little break now and then, or some time when they could, to just get their head about them. I know that one of my concerns with the principals, because I've never seen people work so hard in my whole entire life as they did through that pandemic and the hybrid, and I've been very worried about their emotional and, their well-being, because they they have not had a break. And so, the Department of Ed decides to bless us with a bunch of COVID tests suddenly. And I was back and forth with the superintendent, like, we cannot, I will not, the principals cannot. It was during vacation, like, no way, just not going to do it. So we arranged it, I went, picked up the test, came here, we made appointments, kept them out of it. They didn't need to be involved, right? So I would do anything to help or to take some of the heat off of the people in the district, because there's no question it's been challenging.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
So, as you know, the special education population is well above the state average in Wareham. What preventative measures are currently in place, and what would you recommend adding or strengthening?
I know that there's quite a bit of support in the places where it's necessary. I did an analysis of that, and of the staff, who's where and who's doing what. And for the most part, we have enough inclusion teachers in each of the schools, and we have decent programming. I think that we also have put in place, which has been really good, we have a department chair of special education at the middle school, and we have an assistant principal of special education at the high school, they're both very skilled at what they do. They speak to each other all of the time for transitions, and that's been excellent. I know that here at the elementary school, there's a lot of support for students, just generally speaking, and the programs are strong. And so the staff are really good at helping our students. I think that the rate is too high. I think I don't know that it's been, I don't know how accurate it is, right? Particularly if you were to take out inclusion versus sub-separate. I think that there's an overabundance of inclusion kids that if we had gotten it earlier, they may have been okay and not necessarily needed to be in an inclusion. And so the goal really is to look at how do we do that. And so right now, the percentage at Wareham Elementary School, is 18%, which is closer to the state average. As you move up, you have 27% at the high school. There are 170 special education kids of 606. That's a lot. And at the middle school, it's just a little bit less. So the goal really is to, we know we're going to have our sub-separate students, and they need to be supported, right? They just do. All of our kids need to be supported. And I believe they need to have as many opportunities as possible. So I speak with people a lot about special education. I'm very close I evaluate Catherine Frayne and Andrew Cannon both. So I'm involved in what they do quite a bit. And so I think more education around special education would be wonderful. I know that through the survey, I learned that people want to know more about laws, IEP development, writing measurable goals would be awesome. More specific, I think would be helpful, right, in order so that we can sort of target and make sure that the kids are getting what they need. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I also believe we have a solid group of people right now in place that are doing some really good work in special education.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
As the future educational leader of Wareham Public Schools, what would be the most important achievement on which you would like to have made substantial progress by the end of year 3, and by which you would like your performance to be significantly measured?
I'm going to give you an example of what happened when I was a principal of middle school. I was first the assistant principal. 5 union reps were in the building, and the principal didn't start off well, and so the people there were very, very upset and angry and were continuously at the superintendent's office complaining about the principal. And I had just started to work there as assistant principal. And so I started to build relationships with the people. Just how are you, what's going on, what can I do to help? And I asked if I could be involved in scheduling, for example. Scheduling is not given nearly enough credit. It is a huge component in how a school runs every day, and it relieves a lot of anxiety when people know what that schedule is going to be. So I was able to take over the schedule. Then I asked if I could help teachers with data. So I was able to then create a venue for teachers to feel safe about looking at data. So I was very careful about how that process went, and I thought about what needed to happen, because they were upset because they were told that they were terrible, basically is what happened. So I wanted them to a safe place to be able to look at their own performance with their own students and figure out what they needed to do, and then collaborate together to come up with some plans, and that went really well. I started to enlist the paraprofessionals and treat them with a high level of dignity, and they were teamed up with special education teachers, and they were given a lot of the same time that was necessary to assist our students that they were supporting. And so there was a level, and then I would meet them in a morning after a faculty meeting, because they didn't have to stay, and I would redo the faculty meeting in that morning so that they were aware of what was going on. And I always shared the agendas with them as well. So if they had any questions, they could bring them to me. So I did that every time I had a faculty meeting, and that, because they see a lot of people in the building, they can change the tenor of what's going on. So I just built these relationships over time. And I learned, and I kept learning about what works, what doesn't work, how it's going to work, and I formulated a vision in my head, and I was ready. Whenever I've been in any of these positions, I never plan ahead. I do the job that's in front of me, and I don't imagine I'll ever be that next job. I've done it with assistant principal, even from teacher to assistant principal. I never imagined myself in the role. And when I came here, I didn't ever imagine I would want to be a superintendent. To be perfectly honest with you, it was the farthest thing from my mind at the time. And then something happens suddenly. Like, you realize, wow, okay, and things start to build, and you start to learn, and you take it all in, and then you begin to realize what you could do, and maybe you could make it better, and maybe you could change a culture. Maybe with these collaborative efforts and this talking and these building of relationships and the trust that you have demonstrated and earned through that demonstration, you actually could help transform the way it works, the way people feel about coming to work every day. And as a principal, that happened. And for the time I was there, 5 years, it was on fire. Like, it was an unbelievable place to be. People from the outside would come in and say, what's going on here? Like, it was just something changed. It transformed. And it was a result of sometimes what you would consider really small details that you might not otherwise look at, all of a sudden become very, very important. That's another thing I learned. Every decision you make in schools matters. Every decision. And sometimes you mess up. Like, I might change a schedule 5 minutes off and think no big deal. Well, those kind of things are a big deal. Mm-hmm. So you have to take into consideration what you're doing and be very, very conscious about if you make a decision or you've talked to people and you collaborate, and then you have to look at what ifs. If I do this, then what? And so I believe that with all that I have gained as a result of this experience, that would, to have people, all people, walk through the door, have that sense of that jump in their step where they feel that they're supported, they're cared about, and that somebody has their back. It's kind of amazing what can happen in a district when that happens. So that would be really awesome. And that would also help to address Kevin's question with the reputation and who we are. Because if everybody's experience here is like that every day, then that's going to be the word on the street. So it worked where I was. That's all I can tell you. I didn't know that that's what was going to happen, but that's what happened. And we were number one MCAS, we had all the data that, you know, like everything just changed. So I think when people feel good about what they're doing and they feel that they can take some risk in what they're presenting and that they're supported in that amazing things can happen in schools. And that would be a really great thing here. And I think there are parts of it that are happening like that now. I probably didn't give you the answer you wanted.
I didn't have an answer I wanted, but the answer you gave me was, for this personality, a little too mystical. And a little too amorphous. And I wondered if there's a little bit more, something a little bit more concrete. And if there isn't, there isn't, about how you would like to be measured.
So you want me to talk about data?
No. Data is great. There's always a place for data. But to say that a school committee could, well, first of all, I think you could expect a school committee would be giving you goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, how you do against those goals would be quite concrete. But I was letting you create your own goals, besides lighting everything going on fire, letting you create if you could create your own goals for the next 3 years, what would they be? And what you gave me was interesting, but a little bit too mystical.
Well, there's nothing better than being in a place where everyone, for the most part, loves to come to work and feels as though they're having an impact on the lives that they're working with. Nothing better than that. So if that is supported and that message is out there, that that's the goal, is to have that happen, then the data will follow suit. When people are afraid, or they don't feel safe, or they're nervous about, there's not consistency in the message, or they don't feel as though they're not quite sure what's going to happen, if they're in that place of trepidation, then it's very difficult. The job is already hard. And so people need to feel safe and supported with a consistent message. So maybe it is, but that's a good beginning.
Thank you.
Next. Former National Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, once stated, and I'm paraphrasing, superintendents are often afraid to be transparent, to tell parents and students the hard truths, to look at the data and be open about it. Please respond to that sentiment and explain how and why you would be a transparent leader.
Well, like I often say, what you see is what you get. I have no axe to grind. I want to work for the benefit of the Wareham Public Schools, honestly, with transparency. I just value the truth, and I value telling the truth overall. I'm not comfortable when I'm in a place where I would need to not tell the truth about much of anything. But I also think there's a way in which you can tell the truth that is productive, rather than counterproductive. So I've learned to pause if something inside of me has been affected, right? If there's some kind of an emotion that doesn't feel right, if somebody asks me a question, I can feel myself getting upset. I pause. And I often will give myself 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours, and I think about the outcome. What do I want to have happen as a result of this? Who will be affected? Who will get hurt if I respond this way? Will it make things better? How can I make it work so that we are getting to where we need to go? And so they're difficult conversations sometimes because you're vulnerable in the moment, and being vulnerable is not easy. But when you have those conversations, you then get to the truth in a way that is productive, right? So telling the truth doesn't mean being insulting or angry. It doesn't work when you do it that way. So I think it's very important to know who you are and to then take that information in so that as you're communicating out, you're actually doing so in a way that's going to help everyone in the organization. I believe that all of my presentations at the school committee have been truthful, I'm thoughtful in the presentation. I would like them to be impeccable every single time, but they change because they're not always impeccable, or I always find something maybe I can do better. I ask for honest feedback as much as possible. I don't have an issue with that at all. I know what I don't know. I'm quick to ask for help. And I don't have all the answers. There are 2,200 students here and about 189 teachers and I don't know, maybe 300 total employees with everyone involved. And many of them are very, very smart. So to think that one person can do it all by themselves is quite egotistical, wouldn't you say? I think it's important that we tap our resources and work with those people collaboratively to come up with some real truths and talk about what's really happening.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, April, sorry, I want to interrupt you. So just for a little, so you can see where we are. So we're at question number 8, and there are 15 questions altogether.
Oh.
We don't really have a time limit, but.
You don't?
Well, we're about halfway through the time we thought we would take.
Am I speaking too long?
No.
Okay.
I just want to give you an idea of where we are
Okay.
in the questions, that's all. I was not.
No, I know, but I
Okay.
just want to keep in time.
All right.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so we have established programs for our top-tier students with curriculum including our IB, AP, and dual enrollment programs, as well as on lower levels involving increased works with literacy. There is a large group of what is commonly referred to as middle-of-the-road or average students. What are your plans for involving and engaging those students who are the ones we primarily seem to lose to school choice districts and making them a priority?
I don't know where those are. I guess I would have to look more closely. I'm not sure that they're the ones that I've heard we lose, but I'll look at that. I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm just not sure specifically if those are the ones that we lose. I've heard in the past that it's the higher kids that we were losing when I first arrived, so I would have to know that. But nonetheless, all of our students need to be enriched in the Wareham Public Schools. And in order to do that, they need certain skills in order to access the curriculum. So we're trying to work really hard to make sure that all of our kids have those skills so that they can actually attend to the curriculum at grade level. So that's part of it. Another thing that we're looking at very closely is we started with when we developed the community portion of the strategic plan, it was college, career, and life inspired was sort of the saying of that. And through that, we have a committee that's formed at the high school for college, career, life ready that is looking at pathways. And those we're challenging basically the way we offer courses and trying to find a way in which we could identify prerequisites that kids need. They need to absolutely have these skills in order to move forward. And then have choices of directions that they would like to go. I ask questions that are not popular, but I think are relevant, like, why do we call an elective and a requirement a requirement? Why can't some electives be requirements? For example, if forensics is a really popular class and we need a lab, why can't we have it be a lab science so that kids could take forensics? or creative writing, or journalism, or any of the many other classes that we offer that we call electives, right? And so I've asked, this team is actually looking at all the different career pathways and what we currently have, because the high school's built up quite a, they're starting to really have some momentum around some of the paths that they're choosing and starting to look at building some of those. And so, and this would be for the whole high school, so it's all students, but imagine a school where kids want to come. Like they really are excited about what they're doing and learning, and then when they leave, they have opportunities, a myriad of opportunities. They can go to college, they can go to work, they know enough so that if they want to go into business and they want to franchise that business, they have the skills to do that. If they're in plumbing and they decide that they want to patent an idea that they think could save the environment, they know how to do that. They understand all of the nuances that happen in work life, and if they choose to, they can go to college. What I worry about is making decisions for 16-year-olds, right? And then them being stuck. No one should be stuck. So they need to be exposed to some unbelievable opportunities and we need to figure out how we're going to offer those opportunities to kids. And we have them in pockets, so it's not like they're not there, but having a focus in those areas would be really fantastic for our students. And it's been part of the plan, I think, since I received that innovation planning grant. I want to say it was 7 years ago. And the whole goal, part of the reason why IB came into effect was because they have a career program, which is kind of cool because it integrates their academics with the career. And so we were planning that, and we had a partnership with Upper Cape Tech at the time, and then they backed out from the partnership because we wanted to offer vocational technical through them with a meaty academic experience, right? And we wanted them after hours, so we were looking at schedules, like we were really looking at trying to be innovative, and they backed out, and then and then IB said we had to have a diploma program before we could look at the career program. So we were like in a spot where we wanted to go somewhere, but we had to do one step first to get to the next step and so forth. And so it all sort of unfolded in that way. So anyway, the goal is to really look at how we do high school and look at ways in which we can make it a dynamic place for kids to learn. So, and it's been that way. We've had this vision for a very long time. It's not new. It's just, it's tough. Change is hard.
So, aside from at the high school level, at the middle school level, it's very similar where there is dual enrollment for the upper, middle school grades and things like that. So what would your plan of engagement be for the middle school students in the same boat without having career options? Well,
they're doing a ton of stuff this year, so you'll see when they go over their school improvement planning and they review their goals from this year. But they are doing some amazing work over there with careers. It's just been unbelievably fantastic. So they're on a mission themselves in that exploration as part of the strategic plan. And I think it's gone really well so far.
Thank you.
Could you describe a time when you had to choose between driving a plan forward or pausing to listen and learn? And tell us what you did and what lessons you learned during that.
I've had to pause a lot, to be honest. I'm in a class now, actually. I'm in 3 classes at the moment, but I'm always in school. But anyway, they've said, I mentioned that I need to slow down, like I need to slow my roll sometimes because I get so excited about and passionate about what's going on and where we're going and what we're doing that I want to just keep going. And so it's part of my personality and it's part of the excitement that I bring. But there have been a lot of times when I've had to pause, like when we wanted all instruction to be rigorous, and I had the Marzano team come in, who's like one of the famous education people, And the professional development was just horrible. Okay, it was just horrible for whatever reason. It didn't work. And that was, I learned a lot from that experience. It was really good for me to learn that. So there's been that. With the COVID pandemic, we've slowed down a lot of the initiatives that we had going on, and it was necessary. People have gone through a lot, and sometimes when people go through a lot, they go back to what's familiar to them, and so we've just sort of let it be, right? Let them sort of go back in and feel okay with what they're doing. And so as much as I say, oh, you know what I mean, like we have to get moving, we also need to understand what's happened and allow for some of that coming back in and taking a break. I've also learned that an initiative is only as good as the people that are willing to actually participate in the initiative, and then also be brave to challenge the initiative or add to the initiative or explore more opportunities about that initiative. And then it becomes something unbelievably great. So I learn a lot by listening, and listening is is active and conscious. You know, people can seem as though they're listening and they're not, and I can tell. And so I like to listen and hear what people are saying. So I've learned so much from the staff here. But I don't think that my excitement and passion will go away. I just have to, I just have to be patient. Mm-hmm. And hopefully some of it will be contagious.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so preschool is often a forgotten entity. How do you currently support your preschool programs and ensure that they are included in the school community as valued members?
Well, the preschool is kind of interesting because it hasn't necessarily been under my purview, because it's a separate program, and the grants connected to that are not under what I have been doing. But we have looked at curriculum, and I spent a lot of time with the preschool, identifying what they currently do and what they need and where they're heading, because the curriculum that we had was not up to date. It was the OWLs, and it was out of date according to the Department of Ed. And so I've been in close contact with Anne Marie, and we've talked a lot about what needs to happen in the preschool to be helpful to them, and we've identified different programs and such that she felt, after she spoke to her people, would be helpful to the preschool. I know that we've done some of the literacy work in preschool as much as we can. We've also enhanced some of the skills, like, just letter sounds and the other areas that we need to address, and that I know that Bethany works very closely with the screening. And so we plan the screening carefully so that we can then provide what they need. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily, I haven't been involved as much as I would like to, because it's usually in somebody else's department, so to speak. But I think it's a valuable program that we offer here. And I've heard really great things about it. And I've analyzed data of our kids that are in it, and they do very well when they're here. I mean, I think that's the best part. So,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
What changes would you make or recommend to be made, depending on the role of the school committee, to Wareham Public Schools that would allow the $2 million plus in ESSER funds scheduled to be used in fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 to be eliminated from LEA spending in fiscal year 25?
Well, I need to look very, very closely at the staff and the FTEs and what FTEs are covered from grants versus what FTEs are covered from LEA. And I really need to see that myself. I need to look at where we are, because I'm not really sure where we are overall, and I need to see it and analyze it. And look at our, I've done an analysis using SIMS data from March as best that I could to identify how many teachers we have in certain areas and how many special education teachers do we have, how much support do we have, what is our enrollment, what is our special education enrollment, all of those areas I've looked at, and I need to go back and match those up with salaries so that I can get a really good idea of where we are. Because I'm not sure where we are right now. I haven't been involved in that process as much as I would have liked to. So I think there needs to be a really careful analysis of staff, of the grants, and of what is being paid for. And then to back up, it's really staff that's the biggest cost to the district. And so I would just like to see it for myself first, and then go backwards from there, plan backwards from there. And then talk to the principals at length about where they are and what they need as a group with us all together to identify all of those areas that may be in good shape or may need extra support or extra help, and then have these collaborative conversations with people to get a really good handle on all of that in the schools. I would love to have the opportunity to do that. So that would be helpful. I've also been looking at budget reports from other districts. So in one of my classes, I asked, who gives the best, most transparent budget analysis, right? So I've looked at those districts, and I've printed I have their budget books, and I see what they include in their budget books. And I found some that I think are really nicely done so that it's very easy to access and understand where things are, why they're there, how they're connected, all of those things I think would be very helpful. And then we can look at the ESSER funds and see where we stand. But right now, I don't have I have a lot of numbers and I have a lot of figures and I have total numbers, but I have to see how they connect to the schools and see how it works, how it's played out in action at each of those schools to then think about what to do from there.
With the chair's permission, can I follow up?
Sure, go ahead.
You basically are responsible for all the grants, isn't that a...
Not all,
Most of them?
no. Title 1, 2, and 4. But I know
Can
that.
you give me an example of a grant that has employees associated with it that you have nothing to do with?
Oh, yeah. There's IDEA, which is through special education. There's all of what Jane gathers. That's all staff are involved in that. There are
So I guess what I'm getting at is, the 2 million is almost an elephant in the room type of number. Meaning that if I was working in this district, I would be very concerned with how that was going to be dealt with, especially because that kind of size extra money can only come from an operational override, and there's a history in this town
it's not going to happen.
of not approving an operational override. So if I were working in this district, I would be very concerned about that, and therefore I'd be very much wanting to know how the future leader was going to, just even at 100,000 feet, we had a finance committee member, for example, say to us, can you afford to have both IB and AP, given, I'm just repeating what the finance
Okay.
committee member said.
Okay.
And I thought it was a legitimate question that deserved a legitimate answer. And therefore, I think everybody would want to know, at least from 100,000 feet, what ideas you might have, without too much specificity, because that would be inappropriate.
Well, I think it's 4 million, that's total, right?
Well, it's 2 million each year.
Right. I'm trying hard to get I'm trying to connect IB AP with $2 or $4 million. It's not really
It
relevant
wasn't
to
my
that.
question, but my
Right,
point is, the finance committee asked that question because they assumed there was a cost associated
Oh,
with
I
having
see.
both programs.
Okay. But were they talking about the assessor money?
Yes, because we have gone to that committee multiple times now and said, yes, we've gotten a 3%, actually a little bit more than that, from the town,
Mm-hmm.
and a commitment to get an additional 3% going forward. But that's not gonna cover anywhere near the people that have been hired and will be paid for by that $2 million a year. So either there's a plan for it, or we're gonna hit what Mass describes as a fiscal cliff, where there's a catastrophe and we don't know what to do about eliminating the $2 million. So having a plan for how we deal with that is critically important.
Mm-hmm. But the most money comes from people. And if that plan has to do with people, then that conversation shouldn't happen out here.
Certainly with not any specificity.
Right. But my sense is that what we have to do is look at the people, and the people are connected to the schools. So the schools and I, or the whoever, it needs to all talk in the same room together to look at what it is we actually have, match that with our enrollment, our special education students, and look at exactly what it is we're doing. So if you do that, and you figure out where we are in that process, then I believe there are ways that we can save some money. That's just off the top, though, and that's without having the detail that I need to actually make that assessment. But just in my quick assessment, I can see that there are some places that could save effectively. I think central office is one of those places, for example, depending, right? So maybe you could save some money at central office. Maybe you could save some money in some of the other departments across the board. And I think it would work to some degree, but I would hesitate to make that statement without having a collective, collaborative conversation with the principals in schools. Because I think together we could make it work. Not separately, though.
Thank you.
Another favorite topic coming up here.
Yay!
Accountability is important, and MCAS provides one measure of accountability. Why should or shouldn't we use pre- and post-COVID MCAS scores and growth rates as a way of judging our effectiveness of delivering the standards? What other assessment data could or should be used to measure our effectiveness in our students' growth?
I think all data is used here in the district. And we all love, I love data. I don't know if everybody loves data, but I really do love looking at it and finding patterns and so on and so forth. It's just the level of how much weight do we give each data point, I think is important when we look at the different things that could affect the data. So COVID, for example, is a huge element that says, whoa, what did we lose, what did we gain? But to combat some of that, we have NUIA, which is a standard-based assessment that we do internally. And that's got some great validity, and it also projects out where kids will end up as a result of their scores. And so you sort of get a nice picture on a very friendly dashboard, actually, that teachers can use to make some adjustments to their practice. And I think it's more accurate, actually, than MCAS. So we have those assessments. We have common assessments. We have Edulastic, which is a in-the-moment benchmark assessments, those quick checks on checks for understanding for kids. And we also I created a document and gave it to all the department chairs at the elementary at the moment that actually says at the end of the school year, K through 4 will have these skills. We'll know this and we'll score this. And it's just the norm basically across the board, but it also gives how many letter sounds, how many high frequency words, right? So it sort of has this idea along the way, but at the end of each grade, this is what they need to have. And so what they've done now is connect common assessments into that. So we'll have the NUIA, which is a great measure, and then on top of that, we'll have teacher checks as they go through that they can say, where are we? What are we doing, and how are we doing? And so I think we have a pretty good system in place for checks and balances for kids. So I'm not saying any of it is not important, but I think it's also important to identify all of the other aspects that might be affecting the data, right? To get the whole truth. You can't just look at a number. I think you have to look at the whole story and figure out what impacted that. What were the causes of that? What were the other experiences of that student? Where were they at the time that that test was taken? You know, kids struggle with various different things. Test taking might be one of those things that they struggle with. Is that indicative of how smart they are? Not necessarily. So I'm not saying we don't. I love data. I think it helps us to make really good decisions as we move along, but it needs to stay right-sized. And we need to triangulate as much as possible when we're talking about our kids.
Thanks.
Yep.
During my 2 terms as school committee member, there has been a large turnover involving bookkeeping, accounting, and payroll positions. We have also had and lost 2 business managers. Our budget is one of our greatest challenges, and this heavy turnover is concerning. What do you feel the reasons for this have been, and how do you plan on going about making this a priority to correct?
I'll just tell you what I've done, right? Because I think it makes sense in what I've learned as I've moved through. So I was not involved in grants when I was hired for the position. I was a principal. I did my LEA budget as a principal, and I knew nothing about how to manage grants and money and what it all meant. So 8 years ago, I was now Title I, Title II, and there was no Title IV then. But I was in charge of these. They're significant grants for this district. And so I was sort of thrown in and figure it out. What do I do? And what I've learned over the time is that each account line and each account number stands for something, and it means something. And it's identified very clearly in the Department of Education's list of codes, fund codes, and so forth. Along with that, we have our major account lines, and then we have our other lines that are in there. And so they all mean something. Every number in that line item has a purpose and a point. So every year I get a little bit tighter and a little bit better, but for example, with Title I and II, I have all of the account numbers preloaded into a spreadsheet, and it identifies exactly where people are or materials or what's being spent, and anyone can look up and see, oh, that's 06, that's travel, or that's 01, that's for staff, or that, right? Because each code it's telling us something. And so for me, I need that clarity so that whatever's allocated there is spent from there. There's no ambiguity in that. There's nothing more clear. So I try to do that very carefully. If something does need to move because it can be unpredictable in schools, because sometimes we just don't know, right? There's a meeting, and we talk about what can and what can't and what needs to be done. And I contact the liaison from Title I, and I ask if I can go on and make an amendment in the grant so that I could move money. And I have to give a reason why. And so that's all documented. And I'm happy that it's all documented, because then anyone at any point can say, here, and I say, here you go. And it tells the whole story of all of it, where it is, what it was meant for, why it was done, and so on. So I imagine that happening everywhere, all of the time, and I don't see any reason why it can't happen. So if everybody knows the rules, then everybody can play by those rules without much of a problem.
Right, but one of my questions, and I understand that, and you may not, but, that doesn't address turnover in those positions, or, why, making that, trying to work that out as a priority as a superintendent?
Well, I think when people don't, when the rules change for people, or when things were or one way and then they're somewhere else, and that's not necessarily coming from us all of the time, okay? Because we also deal with the town offices, right? And so we may follow the procedures that were given to us to follow, and they're wrong. Suddenly, right? They're not the right way they want it done. They want it done this way instead of that way, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of that goes on in the offices, which is frustrating to people, right? Because they don't know what direction to go. They were told to go a direction, they follow that direction, and they're told, no, you can't do it that way, you have to do it this way, right? So there's that kind of tension that happens, and people get frustrated. I do know that there are people that are still, we have 2 bookkeepers that have been there for a very long time. We have a data person who's been there for a very long time. And so there are consistent positions. They're not all up and leaving, but it's definitely, it's challenging to navigate trying to follow everybody's rules when you're given a set of rules and then they change on you. It's happened to me, so I know it's frustrating. But the more clear we are, and the more, I think, steadfast we are in following the procedures, I think the less ambiguity and the less confusion, people will feel safer and can move ahead in a much more productive way.
Thank you.
Could you describe your leadership style and the methods that you have found to be most effective in supervision, building rapport with staff, and how you would establish a culture for the district? And can you tell us what role communication plays in accomplishing that?
I believe communication is key to everything that we do. I did, when I was trying to figure out my topic for my dissertation, I was all over the place, of course, like you're surprised to hear that, but it was really hard to find like a place where I was going to focus. And so I was looking at leadership and I looked at theories, and there are theories for everything, right? But one of the theories that was that felt most comfortable to me was the idea of servant leadership. Because really our job is to serve the people here. And to realize that empowering other people is key, because if everybody feels empowered, then you have a dynamite organization. But if you try to take the power away from people, then you don't, right? You have an organization that's run by somebody who wants to be in charge, right? And so that's not my style. I'm not comfortable in that role. And I believe that I truly believe that the more everyone feels like they're a part of the organization and they feel impactful in that organization, that everything rises. And so I listen intently to people a lot of the time. I take their feedback, I institute their feedback so that they see that it's not just lip service, that I mean what I say. I have the 4 agreements taped to my door. It's a book that I read that's pretty simple, but not necessarily easy to follow all of the time. But the first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And I think that's something that I do fairly well. I won't say something and not do it. Kills me. I will do whatever I can to make it happen. So, and that's really good, by the way, for parenting as well. If you tell your kids you're going to do something, you should do it, or they won't trust you. That's the same with organizations. So I have a deep respect for the work that's done here. I have a deep respect for the people who care about kids. I love kids, so I want to be part of all of it and be here to serve them. I am not driven by power. I am not top down, so if that's what this committee needs, then I'm not the right person for this job. It's not my style, it never has been my style, it doesn't come naturally to me, so I don't operate that way. And I think sometimes it's hard for schools to not hire top down, because that's the way a lot of them operate. So that's not me. I like giving credit to the team. I believe it takes the team to make it work. But I'm also incredibly strong.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have students who would blossom in a vocational school, but unfortunately, they're not accepted. What do we do currently to offer these currently offer these students at the high school, and what would you recommend strengthening or adding for these students?
I think I partly answered that earlier with that group that were
Yeah.
looking for career pathways, but they're also building some more programs at the high school, because it's been something we've been interested in for a long time. It just costs a lot of money. So we're trying to balance what we have and what we can do and add that. But they have phenomenal wood shop. They have a fantastic culinary program that's doing really well. I visited them all today. Their art program is fantastic. The kids were doing some amazing work about diversity and equity, and they were sketching. They were making things for silk screening. And so I've said, you've got to put them all on one, like we need to make this a big message. They were doing some really great work. There's graphic arts, there's DECA, there's marketing, and we've been actively involved in that, obviously, for a very long time. So those options are there, and I think we just need to continue to build on those and to figure out what our kids need, and then do what we can do. But I imagine it being much more dynamic than what we currently have, but we also are fiscally constrained to a degree. So it's checks and balances.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So that is the end of our questions.
Wow.
Perfect. Do you have any questions for us? It's okay if you don't.
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, so at this, we'll give you time to make a closing statement.
Well, what I'd like to say is similarly, I said it at the screening interview. I've gone on a number of visits to now. Why? I'm not quite sure, but I've now trying to move to the next level of leadership, or the last, I guess, level of leadership in my career, which is kind of interesting to think about. But I've traveled to and been part of the finals in, I think this is my 4th final, right? So they're pretty arduous, and there's a lot going on in those. And I've met some wonderful people and found many ways in which I knew I could have a positive impact on their district, just by researching and meeting people and getting to know them. But I wasn't absolutely sure that I was the right fit, right? I just, you don't know, because you don't really know people. Here, I know I am. I know I'm the right fit for the position and the right person at this time for the job, for momentum, consistency, and continued forward motion. I think I've built great relationships. People have trusted what we've done, and we've come a long way as a result of that. So regardless, I'm very proud of the work that's happening and what's been done here at Wareham Public Schools, the faculty, the kids, all of the staff that contribute. And so either way, it's a great place to be. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens as we move ahead. It was a great day today, by the way.
Oh, good.
Even though I knew everyone. It's still a good day.
Good, yes. And thank you to everyone who made that day possible. Jamie, thank you for planning, and thank you to everyone who made time today.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the school committee will meet again on Thursday at 6 p.m. to interview the second candidate for superintendent. But at this time, unless anyone has anything else, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? 500. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, for getting here as fast as you could. WCTV is once again recording tonight's interview and to be broadcast at a later date. And I just want to say thank you to John and his team, although he seems to be a one-man show over there tonight, for all that you've done. We're happy to have our second candidate for superintendent here with us tonight, Dr. Matt D'Andrea, who's currently the superintendent on Martha's Vineyard. Hope you enjoyed your visit here today.
I did very much, thank you.
Thank you to everyone who took time out of their day for his visit today. Thank you to Jamie for making all those arrangements. We'll follow the same format that we followed Tuesday. We have 15 prepared questions. We'll give you an opportunity to make an opening statement, a closing statement. And we don't really have a time schedule, but it should take about an hour and a half, I think. Okay? All right, unless anyone has any questions, anything they'd like to add? Did I forget anything?
Do we have to open this like a normal school committee meeting or no?
Oh,
I
we
can't
d-
remember if we did or we didn't.
No, you're right, we did. So we did open the meeting, but I will give every school committee member an opportunity to introduce themselves again. I know it seems awkward, but go ahead and do it.
I'm Mary Morgan, a school committee member.
Kevin Majali, School Committee.
Joy, school committee.
April Rossi, school committee.
Jeff Sweat, School Committee.
All right. So then we will go ahead and give you the opportunity to make your opening statement.
So thank you, everyone. It was a great day today. Thank you to everyone who took the time to show me around. It was great to be back in Wareham, see a lot of old familiar faces, see this beautiful building, see the students. It was very exciting for me. 26 years ago, I started as a teacher in this district. I feel that in Wareham, I learned what good education is. I learned how to be a good teacher. Very diverse student body, very excellent teachers. I was fortunate when I was hired that I was put right next to a very excellent fifth grade teacher who mentored me, and I was able to pick his brain and become, and I felt I became a good teacher over that 10-year period. So during that time, I got to know families, really appreciated the families here in Wareham. And I've always, as I've moved on, moving into Old Rochester and then Martha's Vineyard, I always thought about the possibility of coming back to Wareham. And my wife and I met my wife here. My children were born when I was teaching here, and we always talked about coming back. And I remember that when I left in 2006, there was an exit. It wasn't an exit interview, but it was an exit worksheet I was supposed to fill out. And I remember specifically putting down, I hope to someday come back in a different capacity. And that's always kind of stuck with me. And so I'd love for that to happen. So that's why I'm here.
All right, thank you.
Would you like me to begin?
We'll start with
Chair?
Jeff. Yes, would you please begin?
Dr. D'Andrea, could you please describe the three most important initiatives in order of increasing importance you have taken in your current position and the measurable impact they have had on the education of students in your school districts?
Okay. In increasing importance. Well, I don't know if I can really differentiate them like that. They're all pretty important. I would say, so the first one that I would say was one in which I recognized when I first was hired. when I went to Martha's Vineyard, I was the assistant superintendent. And as the assistant superintendent, we had gone through a number of special ed directors. There was inconsistency in our special ed department. Communication was poor. Parents were unhappy. Staff was unhappy. And we really needed to bring the consistency back to our special ed department. And so one of the first things I had to do was hire a new special ed director, because when I first got the job, the gentleman we had got another job off island. And so we went out and interviewed. We had 2 candidates that were in the district. We had one that was teaching in Boston, that was working in Boston. And the search committee selected the individual that was working in Boston for the position. And they referred that hire to me. I went on a site visit, I checked references, and ultimately things did not work out. I was concerned about bringing her to the island. That is something that's a challenge that we have on the island, is folks excited about coming to Martha's Vineyard and working on Martha's Vineyard, and when they get there and they start looking at housing prices and the cost of living, they either don't take the job, or they take the job for a while and realize that it's too frustrating and they leave. And having consistency is a challenge, and especially for special ed, we needed it. So the 2 candidates that were left were not a high choice for some on the search committee. There were school committee members that were not particularly fond of them and the job that they were doing. I myself felt that they were folks that we could work with and we could improve and develop. And what was most important is that they were going to be there. They were going to. One of them was an island person, grew up on the island, and was going to probably be on the island her whole life. The other one was the director of special education at our high school, and she had just bought a house and she was settling in. So I was confident that they were both going to stay. So what I did is I proposed to the school committee that what we do is develop a co-director position. I took the position out of the high school. That's the director of special education. I added responsibilities to that position. I reduced the responsibilities for the director of student support services, and I called them co-directors. Fortunately, they got along very well. They collaborated very well. They supported each other very well. I intentionally overlapped their responsibilities, so they had to work together. And over the time, both of them grew tremendously. We brought in an individual named Jim Schillinglaw, who was the director of student support services in Barnstable for a number of years. He was retired, and he was working as a consultant. We brought him in. He did a complete special ed evaluation of our shared services program, which works very much like a collaborative on the island, and our school-based special education programs. And based on his recommendations, we reconfigured the way we were doing things. We made some personnel changes that brought the consolidated services for students that allowed us to better serve them. We were also able to make some changes in some of our programs to reduce some of the staffing and save some money. Recently, one of those co-directors retired, and the other co-director, through the years that she has been working with us and my administrative team, has flourished in the position. Even when I went to, I moved to, I wanted to make her the the sole director again, go away from the co-director model. I did get some pushback from school committee, but ultimately, I said it was the right thing to do, and that she was ready for it. We put her in the position, and she's been terrific. And some of those school committee members have come to me and said, you were right, that was the right move. Right now, we have a very good special ed program. There's consistency now, and we are delivering instruction to those students better than we ever have. We actually now have folks who do move to the island, if they can, for our special ed programs that we offer there. So that's something I'm very proud of, that we have, that will be in place for many years. A second change that I've made is changes to our ELL program. When I first started on Martha's Vineyard, there were 75 ELL students collectively on the island. There are now 450. 90% of those 450 come from Brazil and speak Brazilian Portuguese. We have students that move to the district that have no English. This is a change that when I started, we had an ELL director and a few ELL teachers in our buildings. Our population was growing at a very fast rate. We had to think on our feet and make changes. We instituted a newcomer program, which is when students move to the island that only speak Portuguese, they go to the newcomer program. The newcomer program is completely taught in Portuguese. It's a way to get the students comfortable and acclimated and understand how the building works and what the expectations are. They start to learn English, and then we gradually move them out into the population. They can start getting to know more students and get more comfortable. We have hired a community outreach coordinator that is bilingual, and she works with our Brazilian families. During the pandemic, she went as far as she would visit homes. If we did not have some of our Brazilian population participating in Zooms, she would go and help the families, and we would help get them any internet connection they needed, any technology, any hardware. We have made it a point to celebrate our Brazilian community. Tonight we have a Brazilian culture night at our high school. We have brought in, I think I said this to the screening committee, we had German. Our three languages at the high school were French, Spanish, and German. German was dwindling down, the numbers that were participating. We switched that to a Portuguese class, Brazilian Portuguese, for students who spoke Portuguese already. It's a Brazilian, a Portuguese heritage, where many of them can speak Portuguese but cannot read in Portuguese. So it's more of a reading in Portuguese class. I believe that those changes that we have made has created our schools, or made our schools much more welcoming than they were. We have far greater participation of our Brazilian families in our schools. We had in the past an attendance issue with some of our ELL students. Part of this was the hope to improve our attendance. We were finding that attendance was leading to dropout. Poor attendance was leading to dropout, is what I mean. This increased our attendance. We were below the state in attendance prior to this, and now we are much better, and I mean improving the attendance of our students. So it has been tremendously helpful in that respect, and I think that's something that also is beneficial. And third, I would say that probably our writing, the MCAS data prior to the pandemic was showing that we were not doing well, our students were not performing well in writing. And there was a small grassroots effort in some of our buildings, our elementary buildings, to utilize Lucy Calkins writing. And so we fostered that, bringing in professional development for our teaching staff on writing. And we sent our administrative staff to New York, to Teachers College at Columbia University for training in Lucy Calkins administration. We made the investment in the program materials. We paid teachers in the summer to attend the training. A silver lining of the pandemic was that Lucy Calkins put all of their training online on a Zoom, and prior to that we had to send them to New York, and there was all the expenses with that. So we've been able to, that has helped us to get more teachers trained in the writing program. We scheduled additional time during the school day for teachers to invest in their writing program. And we saw, prior to the pandemic, we saw an uptick in our writing. Specifically, we could see the teachers who were using the Lucy Calkins compared to those who were not, how much better their students were writing, which spoke volumes and got more of our teachers excited about it and attending and participating in the training. I believe very strongly in the importance of students when they leave us in 12th grade, that they have excellent writing skills. Writing, reading, speaking, listening. I think if we can make them excellent in those areas, they can do anything that they want.
Thank you.
I've got the next question. With a significant number of families opting out of Wareham via school choice, how will you help ensure parents and the public that Wareham schools provide a quality education and well-rounded extracurricular experience? How can we effectively brand our schools and tell our story?
So branding, we've done some branding on the Vineyard. We have a really nice new fancy logo, which looks great. But more importantly, we've done a lot of sharing at public meetings what we are doing well, especially at budget FinCom meetings, where we have been able to show not just how what we're asking for in the budget is connected to the schools, but even outside of that is what are our goals for our students, and how are we getting there, and how are we doing? And we have found that by advertising that, we have gotten more buy-in from our town administrators. They get excited about the education that the kids are getting in the school. They get excited about supporting the budget when they know that the money that they are approving is going to good use, and that we're spending it in the best way that we can. The important thing with branding is important, and utilizing Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and any of those social media accounts is great. And there are opportunities to get the word out about what is going on that's great in the school. The thing for me is the first thing that you need to do if you want to branding comes after success in the classroom. So for me, the first thing you need to do is make sure we're getting the job done in the building. That if we're advertising, you want to keep your kid here in Wareham, that we really believe you want to keep your kid here in Wareham. We are doing a great job educating your child. We are providing excellent opportunities for your child to grow and learn. So for me, that's the first thing. I want to say it, but I want to believe it. So that's the first thing I would want to make sure we are doing a great job. Then you want to share out every way that you can how, what we're doing, where we're doing well. I've seen Dennis Yarmouth. I don't know if they did have a radio commercial advertising their district, as did Mashpee. I spoke with the superintendent in Dennis Yarmouth, and she said that it has been effective. I think it's a good idea, and I actually thought their commercials were pretty good. So getting the word out is crucially important. There's lots of ways to do that. But I would want to make sure also that we're getting it done in the buildings first.
Thank you.
April. So, a major role of the school committee is to conduct evaluations of our superintendent. If given a less than proficient score in a potential evaluation, what would your course of action be? Would you consider the constructive criticism and address what may have been seen as shortcomings, acknowledge and make strides to correct them, or would you consider the evaluation derogatory and seek legal action?
The evaluation system that the state of Massachusetts developed, or the Department of Education, I believe is a good evaluation system. I like the evaluation system probably mostly because the first step for the educator is reflection. Looking back on what am I doing well, where can I improve? For me, as someone who evaluates staff, I put a lot of weight on that. It teaches me a lot about that teacher, that educator, how that person reflects on themselves. Do they accurately and honestly reflect and share what they feel their weaknesses are and what their strengths are? For me, that's important, and if they do, the tool itself is terrific as looking at specific areas where you can improve and what you need to do to improve. Also, focusing on students and focusing on professional development. So I really do think that it's a good tool to use to improve teaching and learning and administration leadership. And I think that's how it should be used. I think that's the first position you should take, is that this is a tool to help improve you in your job. Now, certainly there are times when a staff member is not doing their job, and you have to use the tool to apply a little bit more force, and that happens. But the majority, for me, the majority of those in which you evaluate, you're going to use it as a tool for improvement. So to answer your question, I would see it, I don't want to get a needs improvement, but I would look at it as why, so, I would expect to go through that process with you And I would expect to know why I got that needs improvement. And then I would expect that you would tell me how you think I can improve in there. And I would myself reflect on that and look for ways to improve.
Thank you.
So there has been much discussion about the effects that the pandemic has had on our students and the learning loss that has occurred. And we don't hear as much about the profound effect that it's had on our teachers and staff who are working with the students every day. So what strategies would you use going forward to support these teachers and other staff members?
During the pandemic, actually prior to the pandemic, we established a position of mental health coordinator. And our mental health coordinator, primary focus is student mental health. But we have also charged her with staff mental health. So she has organized a number of different opportunities for staff to relieve stress, vent, spend time together, have yoga classes. She was able to get a grant to pay for an app called Calm, which I don't use, but my wife does, and she says it's great. And it's been very popular. And that's been helpful. Teachers have taken advantage of that. I think also showing appreciation for that, recognizing that you see that this is really hard, what's been happening here, and we'll support you, and we appreciate everything you're doing for our students. We had a professional development day earlier this year. And what I did was, and I can't take total credit for this idea, was I got a shopping cart from Kronig's Market, and I did return it. We did ask to use it. And I filled it with candy and granola bars and potato chips and all kinds of goodies, donuts, and I did have some healthy stuff in there too. And as the teachers were working in different groups, different buildings, I went into the school with my shopping cart with all the treats in it, and I went around to all the teachers and gave them a treat. Now, it was something small, but they appreciated it. It was just to say thank you for everything they've done. So those are some of the ways that I've done it in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. The special education population is well above the state average in Wareham. What preventative measures would you look to see that are in place to help prevent?
To lower that? So early identification that a student is struggling is key. So I'm talking, kindergarten, first grade, where you identify that a child perhaps is struggling and falling behind, and providing that student with intervention to get caught up. That is a huge piece of it. Good instruction, of course. The number one factor that attributes to student success is the teacher in the classroom. And providing teachers with professional development and time to work together to ensure that teachers have the tools that they need, have the training that they need, have the time to learn from each other, that you get better instruction, and less instances where students may end up in special education. We have been using a tool that's called Analytic View. And it is what it does is it gathers data on students in our system, and it in the lower grades, any test scores that they have, classroom grades, discipline, attendance, and we get red flags. It updates on a regular basis and will provide red flags for students that perhaps are falling behind because something's going on at home, or and it's creating attendance issues, or there's been multiple disciplines. So it puts a red flag for our guidance department, and they will check in with that student.